I am Ed Jamison. I am the CEO for Operation Kindness, and this is Meredith Jones. She is our Chief Community Initiatives Officer. So we're really looking forward to talking with everyone today. Go ahead and kick that. You're going to hear a lot more from Meredith than you are from me. One, I've been doing a lot of talking. You can hear it in my voice, but she's the smart one out of this group. For 47 years, Operation Kindness has been an amazing adoption center just north of the city of Dallas. It's been amazing. But we lived in a really nice, safe bubble. Animal welfare has changed. In Texas, there's a lot of highly adoptable animals that are not making out of shelters, and Operation Kindness could fill that gap. Well, as things change and the government shelters in particular get better, they need assistance in different ways. And as we started to acknowledge and look at access for care, we knew that we needed to find a way to not expect people to come to our shelter to receive something, but how can we get out to the people who need us the most? Because Carrollton, Texas is a pretty well-to-do area. So just a little bit over a year ago, trying to come up with the thoughts of what are we going to do to reach other people, we came up with that we need to create a whole nother arm that is community work, that is collaborative, that is out working with the entire community. And that's where Meredith and her team comes in. And it's funny because it was at the Best Friends Conference 1 year ago that it was Meredith's second week at work. She stayed back in Dallas and was putting her team together. And just in a matter of 1 year, our community initiatives team impacted 18,000 animals. And those are animals that we would have otherwise had no connection with if you weren't one of the 6,000-ish lucky ones that were able to make it into our shelter. So we've got some good points here that, looking for a good discussion here. And I'm going to kick it over to Meredith on how we're working with the community.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for being here. So when we launched our community initiatives program last July, our number one goal was to be responsive and flexible to community need. And so while we didn't know exactly what maybe our program would look like, we did want to establish some really foundational principles so that even if and when community need changes, we always have our North Star, pointed in the right direction. So we knew that we wanted to create programs and services that were compassionate, non-judgmental, affordable, and accessible in order to keep pets happy, healthy, and in their loving homes. We also wanted to eliminate economic euthanasia as a forced decision for pet owners. We never want pet owners to have to make a permanent decision based on a temporary situation. And we also wanted to prevent treatable, preventable, yet fatal diseases like parvo and distemper. Of course, we wanted to support our under-resourced shelters, and we also want to improve the quality of life for all animals in our communities. Now, one key word of community initiatives is community. And right, a lot of times when we talk about community, we're talking about own pets or community cats. We really wanted to be expansive in who we wanted to help. So when we say community, we mean all animals in a geographic area. So yes, that means owned pets, that means community cats, but that also means pets in our shelters, pets in our rescues, pets that don't have a home, strays. So every pet within the geographic areas that we serve, that's who makes up community initiatives. So currently, and I say currently because again, and you're going to get sick and tired of hearing me say this, but we always want to be flexible and responsive to community need. So I say currently, these are our 4 areas of focus, and it's through these areas that we served a little over 18,000 animals within the past year. First, we have our Lifesaving Partnerships program. That's going to be our shelter collaboration. Huge partner with Best Friends and all of our North Texas shelters. And this is when we want to be a true partner, true collaboration, like we're going to talk about today. And we work with shelters to create policies and protocols and procedures that can result in long-lasting, sustainable, transformational change, right? Policies that are going to help that shelter help our community save them all. We also have our interstate animal transport program. And here we work with source shelters, not just to take their adoptable animals and ship them north, but it's a true partnership with our source shelters where we want to help them with their medical protocols. We want to help them with vet services. And so we really focus on under-resourced and overcrowded source shelters. And we have some amazing destination shelters and rescues north that we partner with. we have our veterinary forensics program. That is a partnership specific right now between Operation Kindness, Dallas Animal Services, and Dallas Police Department. And OPK provides a vet and techs who perform veterinary forensic services such as necropsies and live exams for animals suspected to be victims of cruelty or neglect in Dallas. Then we have our community wellness program. And that's comprised of our affordable and accessible wellness clinics. These may include vaccines, microchips, heartworm testing, flea and tick prevention, everything we can do in order to improve the health and quality of life for animals in our community. Okay, so our roadmap for the day. What are we going to talk about for the next 39 minutes? We are going to talk about how we identify challenges within our community that need solving. Then strategies. We're going to talk about how we create strategies to address these challenges. And then scaling. I'm going to pepper in some examples of how we have scaled solutions to fit our community need. Okay. So how do we start? How do we identify challenges that we want to solve within our community, right? This is going to be the baseline of all of our collaboration. First, we want to create a list, just a basic list, an unbiased identification list. We want to identify all organizations that are serving pet owners as well as their people. Now, key in this isn't identification, it's unbiased. I say that because, not that any of us have ever done this before, but what we don't want at this point is that clinic down the road, they say they're open 7 days a week, but we all know they're only open 2 days a week. Now is not the time for that. We're just going to list all organizations that provide programs and services for pets and their people. Number 2, include all organizations. So I keep saying pets and their people. And the reason why I say that is because, of course, on our list, we're going to have our animal-related organizations. We're going to have our shelters, our clinics, our full-service vets, our rescues, our groomers, our pet supply stores. Those are kind of the easy, front-of-mind ones. But we know, right, that there's a really strong overlap between some of the pet owners that we serve and a lot of people that human social service organizations serve. And if the goal of our collaboration is to maximize our impact within the community, we want to be able to also include organizations that are reaching potential pet owners that we may not know of or that we may not be reaching yet. Number 3, this sounds very counterintuitive. We want to start backwards. We want to identify what we do have versus what we don't have. You can ask any of my team members. I drive them crazy. We do not say the word problem. It's like Voldemort, like you just don't say it. And the reason for that is how we frame a challenge or how we frame a collaboration makes all the difference in the world, right? So we want to frame positive. We want to start positive rather than start negative. It's kind of like that, old kind of story of if someone asked me today, right? Meredith, how many people did you notice yesterday wearing striped shirts? And I'd say, I don't know, a handful. But then if tomorrow I'm told, hey, Meredith, count the number of people, be on the lookout for the number of people wearing striped shirts today, I would think that the whole world has somehow changed their wardrobe and everyone was wearing a striped shirt, right? And that's just because of how that was framed. So since we want a successful collaboration, we want to be positive, we want to first identify what we do have and focus on that versus what we don't have. Inevitably, what we don't have is going to come out a little bit later, and we'll talk about that. Then we also have mapping. Simple. This just establishes where our services and our programs are located. And we'll talk about it in another slide. But mapping can be really helpful because it shows where programs and services are located, but you can also overlay that map with information like census and demographic information, or information from your shelters, like where service requests are coming from, where owner surrenders are coming from. And this can be really helpful in guiding where we want to really start our programs and our services. Okay, solving. These certainly are not the only challenges that are out there that we've experienced, but Within the past year or so, as we've collaborated with our partners, these are some of our most common challenges that we have seen and we're working on. First one, a lack of resources, right? Particularly when it comes to money and staffing. A lack of knowledge and experience, and this is on both the pet owner and the organizational side. Number of service providers. A lot of times we have a lack of service providers, so we have to figure out why that is. Is it a supply issue or is it a demand issue? And then lastly, I know this is shocking because we're all in animal welfare. We want to save them all, so surely we all get along, right? So it's probably shocking that one of the challenges that we have to overcome might be past organizational relationships and history and misinformation that's out there. Okay, solving for a lack of resources. And we found that there are three primary areas when it comes to a lack of resources. Sometimes we'll have pet owners who have a lack of resources. And I put on here affordability and accessibility. It's not affordability and or accessibility. You really have to have both if we're going to maximize impact for our pet owners who may be suffering financially. So affordability, right? We may have a bunch of clinics or programs or services in an area that are affordable, but for whatever reason, our pet owners can't get to those programs or services. It may be that geographically too far away. It may be that the days or hours that we're open don't fit really well with what the pet owner needs. But then the flip side, right? Accessibility. If we have clinics, programs, services, shelters that are affordable, but they're not accessible, right? Then, I'm sorry, flip it. That are accessible but are not affordable. It doesn't matter if you have a clinic that's right next door. If a pet owner can't afford services, they're not going to be able to partake in that. So it's really important as we solve for financial challenges for pet owners that we look at both affordability and accessibility. Okay, then we have financial on the organizational side. If I had a mic, which they wouldn't let me have because I would have dropped it right now, I have like 5 mic drop moments. This is the first one. It is okay to need funding and revenue to operate. I'll say that again. It is okay as a business to need funding and revenue to operate. What does that mean? If you can't provide services for free, that does not mean that you don't care. I'm going to say that one again too. If as an organization, you can't provide services for free, no matter what people say about you on Facebook, no matter what people put on their Yelp review, it doesn't mean that you don't care, right? At the end of the day, all of us, we're still running businesses, right? So we have business expenses. And how do we take care of business expenses? With business revenue. It's kind of like when my rent is due every month. I haven't tried this, but I have a real strong suspicion that my landlord wouldn't be super amenable to me saying, hey, can't pay you out of my checking account this month, but here are 20 really heartwarming pictures from our vaccine clinic. So, you know, if we can work with that instead of my checking account, no, right? So we are still a business, we have to operate. And if offering services for free leads us to going out of business, and in the long run, we're not helping anyone, right? Staffing. This is a big one. And we have shelters that we're working with that have kind of an either or problem. We do have some shelters who are fully staffed, but their budget doesn't allow for enough staff to take care of the number of animals that they're taking care of. That's a little more rare. What we're seeing more often is that shelters do have a budget for staff and resources, but they don't have the staff filling open positions, right? We may have some people in this room who have beautiful surgery suites that are going unused. You know, the lights are turned off. I'm going to kind of intersperse our first story here about a really great collaboration that we have found over the past year. So anyone who was at the general session yesterday saw Ed and Art. Art is the director of Garland Animal Services, and we had been doing vet work for him. He was able to pay us for vet work, so he didn't have an issue with the budget, but he didn't have the staff. At the same time, we were also kicking off our shelter collaboration with Balch Springs Animal Shelter, which is a much smaller animal shelter near Garland. And we were talking through some of their challenges, and one of their challenges was spay neuter for large dogs. They had a spay neuter provider, but the spay neuter provider would not alter dogs over 70 pounds. And so what happened with this, right? Anytime a 70-pound or larger dog came into Balch Springs, regardless of temperament, they didn't have an opportunity to alter it if it was unaltered, so they would have to euthanize it. There was no other option for them. We immediately wanted to solve for that, and since we were working with Garland at the time, Art, he's been really incredible. Not only does he look out for his own community in Garland, but Balch Springs being a nearby community, without any hesitation whatsoever, he said, hey, my brand new building, we have a huge surgery suite. Why don't you guys just bring those big Balch Springs dogs here? And so a couple Fridays a month, one of our vets goes to Garland to perform spay-neuter surgeries. Balch Springs transports their large dogs. And then, of course, we also throw in a bunch of Garland animals for free as a big thank you to Art. But I really love that collaboration because while Operation Kindness, while our CI team may have kicked off that relationship, that's going to be a collaboration that lasts far longer than any of us who are in our current roles, right? And so that's what we're really trying to do when we collaborate, is create long-term sustainable solutions that will outlast any of us. There we go. All right, solving for a lack of service providers. A lot of times we find that there are not enough service providers in an area. Okay, what this is a quick Google search of full service vet clinics in Dallas. I want to make a note. This is my first shout out to Jordan, Spay Neuter Network. They are an incredible partner of ours. So this does not include Spay Neuter Network because we're looking at full service vet clinics. They are an amazing nonprofit, high volume spay, neuter, and wellness clinic. So just wanted to give a shout out there, but they're not on here. But what you will see, right? So Dallas is broken into northern Dallas and southern Dallas, and I-30 is kind of the line of demarcation for this. So I-30 goes east-west, and it's the highway here that kind of goes through the word Dallas. So what you'll see, when you immediately look at this is, well, man, there is a lack of full-service vets in southern Dallas. And so you might immediately go to the place of field of dreams of like, well, if I build a full-service clinic in southern Dallas, they'll come. You will be really disappointed and probably go out of business somewhat quickly if you build a beautiful, expensive, full-service vet in southern Dallas, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we don't want to jump the gun when we immediately see something like this and jump into solving, because we really need to dig a little bit more into the why, right? Is it a supply issue? Is it a demand issue? Are there just no animals in southern Dallas and that's why there aren't clinics? That's actually, spoiler alert, that's not the case. But we really have to dig into our why. And this is when I was talking earlier about mapping, right? So this is kind of the initial map. What we can do is then overlay other maps and other information. So we can do, poverty and demographic information. We can pull information from Dallas Animal Services and see where their service requests are coming from, where their owner surrenders are coming from. So mapping is really important when we have a lack of service providers, but don't take this just on face value. We really need to dig in more.
Meredith, one real quick, this is one of those I am jumping in on. For those not from Texas and from Dallas, that line she talked about on 30, in Dallas proper, 750,000 human beings live in Dallas proper south of Interstate 30. So you have all of the pets that belong to those 750,000 people that live down here, and you see there's only one full service provider. 70% of everything that Dallas Animal Services does is south of Interstate 30. And this all ties in together because these are the things that we are trying to solve for. And again, just going and building a building down there is not the answer. We have to be very strategic and targeted about how you go after that. And that land mass is bigger than the city of Atlanta, and there are more human beings than the city of Atlanta just in southern Dallas. So just so you can kind of have a reference as to how big the scope and scale is there. That's one of my 2 interruptions, Meredith.
Well, I was going to say, for those of you who were making bets, this is slide 9 in case there was an over-under as to when Ed would interject. Thank you for that. Okay. solving, here's a fun slide. We're going to talk about how we identify challenges and how some of these challenges regard knowledge and experience or lack thereof, as well as past organizational relationships and history, like Real Housewives of Animal Welfare. So for knowledge and experience, right? Sometimes we have pet owners who have affordable and accessible options, but they may be unaware. I hate using the term education because I never want to imply the opposite of that, right, is uneducated. I never want to imply that our pet owners are uneducated, but the information may just not be out there, right? So if there are affordable and accessible services and programs out there, we just may need to market it a little bit better to our pet owners. On the organizational side, a lot of times we find that staff lack industry, historical, and/or geographic knowledge and experience in animal welfare. Why these three? I think I'm a really good example. I've moved all across the country in my career. And so when I moved to Texas several years ago, I would say that I brought a fair amount of industry and historical experience, but I didn't bring geographic experience. And I had worked in Ohio for a couple of years. And if I had tried the strategies that really worked well in Ohio and tried that in Dallas, probably would not have gone anywhere, right? And so I say industry, historical, and/or geographic knowledge. So what this means when we're thinking about collaboration is that we want to bring all levels of experience and knowledge to the table. A lot of times as leaders within our organization, we have the first two covered. We have industry and historical knowledge and experience covered, but we may not have geographic knowledge. And you know who has geographic knowledge? Chances are your frontline staff or your volunteers, right? A lot of times we have employees and volunteers who have lived in our service areas their entire lives. And so it's really important when we collaborate that we think about bringing all levels, not only of staff, but knowledge and experience to the table. Okay. Now we have the really fun ones. We have past organizational relationships and history. Again, surely this isn't a challenge for anyone, right? Sometimes we have challenges getting over historical transactions and leadership changes. What do I mean by historical transactions? Sometimes when we try to collaborate, I'm having coffee with someone and I bring up a shelter and they're like, ooh, no, we don't. They euthanized the wrong dog like a few years ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like when was that? And they're like 1973, August of 1973. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Do we think anything might have changed or might have improved since August 1973? And, maybe we need to let that go, right? Next one, leadership challenges. How many times have we been in a brainstorm session? And this happens to me a lot when I've been new to organizations. And I think I have a really obvious idea. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, why don't we just work with the clinic that's 2 doors down? And there's shocked faces and, everyone's aghast. And after 30 seconds of just shocked silence, someone kind of whispers to me, we don't work with him. We don't talk about Bruno, right? And I'm like, why? And it's like an urban legend. No one can really tell you why two organizations don't work well together. It could have been, again, August 1973, the two CEOs got into a fight in the parking lot. No one really knows. All we know is just that we don't work with them, right? And so now is the time when we collaborate. If we're not able to get over these things, collaboration, it stops there. We have to be able to get over these things. We have to be able to give our partners, and same on their part, the benefit of the doubt, right, in order to collaborate. Next, we have misinformation. I don't know if anyone in here attended Catherine and Paula's session about social media and how damning that can be. And what's interesting about this, and I think Catherine and Paula touched on this, a lot of times it's not necessarily the first person who posts that really makes, if they post something incorrect about a shelter or a rescue or an organization, a lot of times it's not that first post that does damage. What does damage is when we reshare or repost that information without researching, and then we perpetuate misinformation. Why is this important for collaboration? Because we have to remember our end goal, right? If our end goal is to save them all, it's to increase life saving within our community. What can happen when we continually perpetuate misinformation and gossip? What happens is shelters and rescues and clinics lose supporters, they lose fosters, they lose donors. And so, a lot of times it's interesting because we think we're doing a good job by, sharing something that may or may not be true. But in the end, we're actually detracting from saving more animals. So in order to collaborate, you really got to shut down that fake, Facebook account that, you look at your like ex's, page on. We got to shut that down. And we cannot post gossip or misinformation or perpetuate any of that if we want to have a successful collaboration. In my mind, this goes to that and it doesn't. So, okay, you'll notice, what did I not list as a challenge? That the shelter down the street, they don't even like animals. And you know what? Actually, in fact, they like euthanizing them. The reason why I did not list this as a challenge, most of the time it's not true. And we cannot build a successful foundation for collaboration if we feel this way, period. I'm gonna say this again. This is my second mic drop moment. We cannot build a successful collaborative relationship if we feel this way. If you continue to feel this way, you gotta stop. You can't move forward in collaborating because it's not gonna be successful. Because we know, right? Very rarely within our industry do people not want to help. If we're coming across like we don't want to help animals, we know, right? It's probably compassion fatigue. It's just being tired of not having resources or not knowing a solution. And that's why we're collaborating, so that we can take some of that strain off ourselves, off each other. We can maximize resources in order to save them all. Okay. As we move into the strategy section of this, we have a few kind of foundational principles that we need to think about and that we need to establish before we start thinking about strategies. First thing, we want to ask, and we want our partners to ask us. We don't want to assume what's wrong. We certainly don't want to get on Facebook and ask other people to tell the shelter what they think they're doing wrong. We don't want to walk into a shelter or a clinic and tell them what they're doing wrong. We want to simply ask. And it's so incredible how asking in a non-judgmental and compassionate way really breaks down silos and lowers our guards, right? On that same note, we want to assume the best. We want to assume miscommunication and or a lack of resources instead of malice and malintent. Again, give people the benefit of the doubt. If I said something wrong, if I did something wrong, is it because I hate animals? Probably not. It's probably because there's some sort of miscommunication going on. Last, and this is really important, this may be Ed's third interjection, slide 12, if anyone's counting. But a successful collaboration is not one organization saving another organization, right? I'm gonna say it again. A successful collaboration is not one organization saving another organization. Instead, it's all partners in the collaboration maximizing their combined resources to affect transformational change and to save them all. Okay. Okay. Again, these are certainly not, this is not an exhaustive list of strategies, but this is just how our CI team addressed some challenges. We want to avoid holes and duplications of effort. We want to start with better versus best. We want to reevaluate existing resources. And I know someone's about to walk out because they're like, I don't have any resources to evaluate, let alone reevaluate. We'll get to that. And then evaluating results. Okay. First, holes and duplications of effort. We want to avoid these. How do we do that? One, we drop the ego. Not only is it okay to not be good at everything, but a lot of times we're not maximizing our impact if we're trying to be everything to everyone. But this is the tough part about dropping your ego. You have to ask yourself a real question. You have to ask yourself, is someone else doing something better than I am? Are they more efficient? Are they reaching more people? Are they having a greater impact? And you know what? Perfectly fine if the answer is yes, because that's who you want to collaborate with. So that gets into be good at what you're good at and find your sweet spot. When we first launched CI last July, we had an idea that we would be spending a lot more time on general public services than we do. Not saying that we don't, because about 10,000 of those 18,000 have been general public animals. But when we first started out, we had a great partnership with Spay Neuter Network. We rented their mobile unit and we did spay neuter surgeries for owned pets. We did this for about a month. It was fine. It was okay. But what we discovered was Spay Neuter Network, shocking, I know, with their name, they're actually way better at spay neuter surgeries and high volume spay neuter surgeries than we are. And you know what? That's cool because we found our sweet spot. So by dropping our ego, by acknowledging that, you know what, Spay Neuter Network has spay neuter in the bag, by acknowledging that, that actually freed us up to start working on high volume vaccine clinics. And we actually found that to be our sweet spot. The cool thing about that is now Spay Neuter Network and OPK's collaboration, we host a lot of high volume vaccine clinics where we sign people up for spay neuter. We recommend people to Spay Neuter Network, and then Spay Neuter Network handles all of the spay neuter surgeries. If both of us had tried to do both things, we wouldn't have maximized our impact. We certainly would not have reached the number of animals, and it wouldn't have been as comprehensive of a plan as we have now that we know, hey, OPK is good at this, Spay Neuter Network is good at that, and that's our collaboration, and it's amazing. That also goes into, there is not a ceiling on or a limited bucket of impact. I think Francis said this in the general session a couple days ago, that the pie is big enough for all of us, right? And what this means is, going back to like business expenses, and we need funding, we need revenue. By my team recommending Spay Neuter Network services, that's not taking any money out of our bank account. That's not taking any potential money out of our bank account. And in fact, you know, in most of our communities right now, demand is exceeding supply, right? And so Spay Neuter Network, Operation Kindness, all of our shelters, we can continue to recommend each other and collaborate and be friends, because at least in Texas, we're not going out of business anytime soon. We want to, but we don't have to hoard our resources or not recommend people because we're worried that that's going to decrease our bucket of impact. The pie is big enough for everyone, right? We want every organization to do well because that's how we maximize impact while also keeping our organizations open and thriving. Okay. Second strategy, start with better versus best. This reminds me of those like 90s motivational posters that had like a guy climbing a mountain and some like motivational saying. So our first motivational saying is, don't let perfect get in the way of good. I know, it's cliche. We say that all the time. But what does that mean? It means that most of the time when we are creating strategies, we don't need to wait until those strategies are 100% perfect or thought through before we try it, right? Because how many of us spoiler alert, I'm going to raise my hand, so feel free to raise your hand. How many of us have spent a ton of time, you know, creating a strategy and it looks perfect on paper, we implement it, and for lack of a better word, it sucks, it tanks, right? But you know, what's valuable about that is, I think a lot of times we learn much more in the like trying and implementation period than we do during the planning period, because a lot of times we're learning as we go. And again, I haven't said this phrase in like 20 minutes. Since we are responding and evolving to meet community need, we're having to try a lot of things. So, you know, have some planning period, sure, but spend a lot more time on the actual trying part of it. Do I have anyone in this room who is a Peloton nerd or addict? Okay, all right. You know, it's a small group. It's a, you know, small family here. There's a coach, Jess Sims. She used to be a teacher And she does these Saturday 60 boot camp classes, which are 30 minutes of like torture on the floor and 30 minutes of torture on the tread. And she'll often ask us, like 40 minutes in, are you ready? And I mean, I'm just on my tread, but I'm positive across the country, all of us are like, do we look ready? No. But the reason for that, she says that being ready is more of a decision and then a feeling, right? So being ready isn't something that we should wait around for. Second, failure is simply feedback. What is fail? It's the first attempt in learning. A big one here, my third mic drop moment. If a strategy fails, guess what? That doesn't make you a failure. Say it again. If a strategy fails, that doesn't mean that you're a failure. And a lot of times, at least for me, I often learn far more from strategies that have failed than strategies that have succeeded. Get comfortable failing. If you want to collaborate and you want to maximize impact, get really comfortable failing, because failing is key, right? If we're constantly pivoting to respond to community need, because inevitably a strategy that was a smashing success a year ago, 5 years from now is going to be irrelevant and a failure. And that's okay. Again, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means we need to tweak our strategy. Last one, I think this is probably several people in the room, our favorite, right? When you want to try to implement something and you have a staff member who says, ugh, Meredith, we tried that 5 years ago and it didn't work. Cool. Again, like since August 1973, has potentially anything changed in the last 5 years? Because change is constant, right? That's my motivational poster. If even one variable within the last 5 years have changed, it's worth trying that strategy again, because sometimes one variable is all it takes to make a strategy a huge success or a total failure. So just because we tried it 5 years ago, just because we tried it, 5 months ago, it doesn't mean that the environment, the situation, the variables are the same. So we are allowed to try it again. Okay. Here's some fun ones. Solving for, so reevaluating existing resources. We're going to use that as a strategy. And then last but not least, evaluating data. Okay. Money. Money is not the only resource. And some of you are like, oh, thank God, because I don't have it. But often when we're brainstorming, we go to a place of we can't afford that or it won't fit in the budget. We have to remember that money is not the only resource. We also have time, staffing, and volunteers. And you guys are like, cool, I don't have those either. Guess what? That's why we're collaborating, right? We are collaborating because if we don't have the resources, we're going to collaborate with partners who do, right? We're not duplicating efforts. So that means that everything that we're bringing to the table is additive and new, and we're going to support each other. Reevaluating roles. So if we've established that community need constantly changes, so therefore our strategies need to constantly change, who's implementing these strategies? It's people, it's us, it's our staff, right? So doesn't it make sense that if we're regularly responding to community need, reevaluating our strategies, that we may want to reevaluate our current departments, our roles, our job descriptions? And I know this sounds scary. When you start messing with job descriptions and titles, people get real nervous. A couple years ago, I had a brief stint outside of animal welfare, and I worked at Boys and Girls Clubs for a year in fundraising, which is fascinating because I don't like kids or fundraising. But so it was a real interesting year. I really rediscovered my passion for animal welfare. But when I came on board, what I found was I had 4 amazing staff members, but since COVID especially, they were working remotely. So one person, did someone else's, a part of their job description because it was easier, and it was just going to be temporary. But now, I still am like, oh, I don't need to lose weight because it's COVID. I don't know that we can still use that excuse, guys. I don't know that it's still COVID. So a lot of times if we're saying something's temporary and we're still doing it 3 years later, it might not be temporary. So what we did was I took every individual task that was listed in everyone's job description. I put all that on an index card. We put it up on a whiteboard, and we kind of reevaluated and recreated 4 positions based on those. And what it did was it made the roles a lot more streamlined. It made our staff a lot more efficient. So of course that naturally increased morale because people really felt like and saw the impact that they were making. And we were a lot more efficient. And so therefore we were able to help a lot more kids, which, you know, if you like kids, which was great. I guess that was the goal of Boys and Girls Clubs, right? Help more kids, which we did. Evaluating data. Okay, so we've collaborated, we've come up with some great strategies. We're not talking about people on Facebook. Everything is lovely. So now what do? We want to make sure that we're evaluating success correctly. Again, community need has changed, our strategies have changed, we've changed our job descriptions. So perchance we may need to reevaluate our current measures of success, right? And we can do this. We definitely want to have goals and measures of success for our collaboration, but we also want to have measures of success for our individual organizations as well, and it's totally fine if that's different. Matching. This is a strange one, I know. Is the data matching what the staff is seeing and feeling? I mentioned this and I put this as my last point because we can't remove the human component of data collection, right? A lot of times there are not a whole lot of things worse for morale than staff's real excited and they're real energized and jazzed up. But then the data is like, hey, actually, you're one of the worst shelters in the country. Congratulations. That just kills morale, right? And so we really have to dig a little deeper. If there's a mismatch between what our staff is feeling and what our data is showing, as leaders, we need to look into that, right? Because if we're focusing solely on data, if we write off, well, those staff, they're real lazy since COVID, or they're not as efficient as we were back in the day. Apparently no one's efficient as we were back in the day because we all keep saying that. But our organizations, right, are helping living, breathing, feeling animals that are being taken care of by living, breathing, feeling, and thinking humans. So we owe it to both living, breathing, thinking, and feeling creatures, right, to go beyond the data and evaluate our operations a lot more comprehensively, okay? Lastly, this slide is intentionally hard to read because I'm just so proud of my team. This is a list of all of the collaborations that we have had and that we have established since July 2022. When we launched in July 2022, we didn't have this slide. We did not have any animal welfare organizations, neighborhoods, businesses that we were working with. So when we follow a lot of the, how to identify challenges, how to create solutions, how to collaborate, how to be nice to your partner, how to be a neighbor, this is what can be the result. So now we work with a little over 100 organizations on a regular basis. And this list is growing. This was actually just through this past June, and we have a few more to add to this. So collaboration is possible. Just remember, we want to be true, equal partners with each other, to be life-saving collaborators within our community and to save them all. Thank you.